Well, welcome to another section of the training. This one's about consistency and integrity and the use of efficiency tools. Now, what this video is really about is how to save yourself hours and hours of time in your grading. And literally, if you take advantage of some of the tools I'm going to talk about here, you can save yourself hours per week on grading. Now, if you already use efficiency tools, this may or may not be as important to you. If you don't know what I mean by efficiency tools or hotkey programs, I'd stay tuned and check out part of this video to see if it's something that can help you out. Now, there's no doubt that teaching an online course properly takes a lot of time. However, we cannot expect our students to improve unless we give them specific feedback on what needs improvement. To provide students the proper amount of feedback, that takes a lot of our time to help them improve their comprehension as well as their writing quality, and often that requires us to write multiple sentences to explain the problem. It's also a simple function that typing, which is how most of us give feedback, takes a lot of time. Now, there is the ability to record videos for feedback, and I'm not going to deal with that in this particular video, but there is a way to actually record video feedback, and a lot of people are moving to that as well. We'll maybe cover that in another video here in terms of how to use video feedback. But many instructors have found that they end up writing the same feedback time and time again because the same problems occur from across multiple students across multiple courses. So therefore, we're often giving the same type of feedback over and over again as we grade week after week. For example, if you happen to teach a particular discipline, you may find that you're always giving out certain definitions, and that repeating those definitions as opposed to providing, if you're having to give those definitions over and over again, you probably have them saved someplace. Well, that's the concept here. Do you have a quick place you reference them? Well, a hotkey program like we're going to talk about here allows you to save those and in one key click, inject that definition into your feedback. Now, what we may say from our students is that our students often give us definitions as opposed to doing a compare-contrast. So, for example, the assignment may be to compare and contrast, and what they do is simply give us definitions, which isn't the same thing. So we see that as a common problem, or we may see that we often deal with improper APA citation format or line spacing problems or reference problems. Just about anything that you assign to multiple students can have the same problem occur multiple times. So what we're looking at here is how do we make ourselves more efficient? So, for example, we're trying to help our students understand what compare and contrast means. We may have to explain that over and over again. Well, if there's a way to give that, to make that feedback easier to give, that's an efficiency tool. Now, we're aware of the challenges inherent in asking instructors to invest a lot of time in a course. And frankly, some cohorts are just simply stronger than others. And sometimes you get a class with 80% achievers who take minimal amount of time to grade. And sometimes you get a cohort with 20% achievers, leaving us 80% of the people who take a lot of time to grade. So the use of efficiency tools simply allows you to be more efficient and reduce that amount of time it takes you to grade. The repetitive nature of grading does wear us down. So what we're talking about here is how can we be effective and spend less time and actually give better feedback. The use of these tools, I believe, actually can allow you to give better feedback and more consistent feedback, because whether you're grading the first person or the last person, each person gets the same feedback for the same particular problem. Now, you'll also find that as you teach multiple courses, there will be specific problems and specific types of feedback for each particular course. And the program I'm going to show you here allows you to deal with that also very easily, as you can create both kind of master feedback comments as well as course-specific feedbacks, and store those in one button and then recall those with one button click. So let me repeat that. You can be able to give extensive feedback on a particular topic with one click of one button. Now, I know some instructors use like a Word doc or a Notepad doc, and they keep their comments there and they copy paste them back and forth. Well, that means you've got to have two programs open, and you've got to do some kind of copy paste function. And the program I'm going to show you, called Type It In, you click a button and it injects the entire comment you stored on that button with one mouse click. And the other advantage is you can then copy that either into a grading feedback box, into a comment box in Word, into an email, any place you need to have that feedback given. Now, these examples you're about to see are mine. This video is very much about how I do something, and that's not to say it's the answer to everybody. It's just something that I have found about over teaching a very long list of different courses, and probably at a couple, 3 or 4 different, 5 or 6 different institutions over my career. So please don't get scared that you need this many buttons to use this type of program effectively. Even if you create just a list of 5 or 6 or 10 buttons, you may find that provides you hours of free time each week from grading. And yes, in my opinion, this program saves me hours a week in grading. So if you teach 2 or 3 courses over and over, your button list will definitely become specialized for those particular courses, and it will save you even more time. Again, I developed my buttons over about 20 different courses, meaning 20 different courses that I've taught, some taught across different campuses, and each course sometimes taught well in double digits. So this first screenshot I'm going to show you is of a program called Type It In. And Type It In is a program which allows you to store comments and then get back those comments with one click of a button. Now, this particular program is available from a company called WaveGet. WaveGet is available online. In fact, I'll put their link up here right now. And this particular program cost, when I bought it, I believe $19.95. Now, that's an investment. I'm a marketing guy. I'm a business professor. So it is an investment that you're going to spend some money. But if you think about your value of time and you spend $19.95 to save yourself 2 or 3 hours a week, or even to save you 3 or 4 hours a month, think about that in terms of how much time you're saving, or you might want to reinvest that time in other parts of your life. So let's look at some of the buttons that I use. Now, many of our courses have the requirement to have at least 2 student posts and to respond to any questions asked from the instructor. So if we look at my buttons here, and these are the buttons I have in my general postings tab, you can see that I've got what appears to be some very common responses and replies and feedback I give to students. So for example, I've got a one-click response button that allows me to tell the students you need to reply to at least 2 students during the workshop. And that's under the button marked number of posts. If I click on the number of post buttons, these 3 lines of type immediately in about 1.5 seconds are injected and copied into wherever my cursor is. If my cursor is in an email, in a grading comment box, where it usually is, or in a Word doc comment, it's automatically going to put that comment right there with one mouse click. Now let's look at a couple other examples to make some more sense of this. Discussions often require critical thinking, which is not just copy pasting as we often see from the textbook or from other particular sources. So I have a button marked that talks about critical thinking. It says, quote, no crit. Now what that stands for is quotations are not critical thinking. That tells me what that button's all about. You would develop your own button dummies, of course. But when we click on that button, we see that underneath it, it gives this rather detailed feedback very quickly. It says, please note that copying a quote is not critical thinking. The goal of discussion forums is for you to put into your words the concepts from the assignment. Copying quotes does not tell us that you have mastered the concepts. By the way, that's also a quality issue. If you see a student who's repeatedly doing large amounts of copy pasting, even if they cite it correctly, it's not critical thinking. So this allows me to give the student a detailed explanation of why their posts are not making full points, not earning full points, because they're doing a lot of copying, which is good, but that's not critical thinking. Think about how long it would take to type this out 3 or 4 times a week, or even 10 or 12 times over the course of a month. And now all of a sudden you realize the value of this one-touch, one-click button process. So, well, the other thing, by the way, is would you give that same feedback if it was 11:30 at night and you're tired, or would you just maybe give a little less feedback? So here, every student's getting the same feedback. That's consistency. Let's look at some other comments that are common. Now, we also often realize that workshop 1 or week 1 is an area for a little bit of grace. So I've built a couple buttons to help me with that. So what might be great for week 1 might not be great for week 2. But again, if you have something that you want to provide encouragement, you can use these buttons to provide good detailed encouragement. It's important to give detailed encouragement as well as detailed constructive feedback, because the students want to know exactly what they're doing well. So here, with one click, I can write, this is exactly what we're looking for. You've got a strong first post, thoughtful reply post, using concepts in terms of the text, and you've answered all my questions. Well done, thank you. Here's detailed feedback that's positive. Again, detailed positive feedback is as important as detailed not so positive feedback. So it's important to give that feedback. This is admittedly a wider range of feedback, so there's a lot of buttons out there in my particular program. But let's look at some other specific buttons which will help the student which will help me give those students that specific feedback they need for specific assignments. This particular screenshot is one from my APA references, my APA buttons. Since I teach both undergraduate and graduate courses, APA is very important. So I've got a whole list of buttons here which highlight very rapidly common APA issues. Think of how many times you've told a student their citations are not formatted properly. Well, here I can click this one button marked citation format, and it gives this feedback, which says, see this link for how to properly cite sources, and sends them to a particular link right away that they can go to and provide some additional information. I'm not giving them the answer here. This is the teach me to fish versus give me a fish concept. If I told them right here exactly how to do it, they wouldn't remember it. I'm making them go do the work, and by that, they should learn that, and it'll stick for a longer period of time. So here, this particular feedback gives that link to support material. Let's look at a couple other buttons. We could also look at this particular one here, which shows how to format a reference listing for an online periodical under my button called OL for Online PERD Calendar, which is periodicals. So here, again, I've said this is an online periodical. Now, this is used in a reference list. So in a reference list where a student has provided what they think is a reference listing for online periodical, but it's not formatted properly, I, in one click, can say, this is an online periodical. Maybe they thought it was a book or something else. I'm telling them what it is, and then I'm directing them to a resource which gives them exact detail in a couple pages of how to format this particular type of reference. I also provide additional information, which is if it is daily or weekly, you got to use the whole date. So again, these are buttons that I can use in any course because APA format's consistent across courses, and this tremendously reduces my grading time and my ability to give students what they need in the undergraduate level, especially, which is the feedback of what's wrong. Because in the undergraduate level, APA is still a learning process. At the graduate level, APA is expected to be known. Now, granted, I use the same buttons for both undergraduate and graduate, but the grading of them is a little bit different. In other words, the shall we say, points earned for weak APA is different at an undergraduate level versus a graduate level. Now, this next screenshot shows a list of buttons I've made for one course I've taught many times, marketing course number 421. Over the course of about a year and a half, I developed this whole set of course-specific responses developed for the various assignments, both specific topics and discussions, as well as specific papers, because I tended to find that I was having to give the same feedback over and over again. Doesn't mean there's something wrong with the teaching style. It just means that students often have the same problems. Doesn't mean there's something wrong with the assignments, the way the assignments are created. It means the assignments are asking the students to do something specific, and they oftentimes aren't quite getting there. So these buttons are designed for that particular course, because as you teach the same course over and over again, you can find a way to save yourself some time. That's great. So let's look at assignment 1.4, which required discussion of ethics. Now, we know that ethics is a difficult topic because it requires theory as well as application. This particular assignment says, write one paragraph for each category that analyzes the post from an ethical perspective. This means some critical thinking and evaluation to determine why it is or is not ethics. Why it is or is not ethical. You're making a declaration. So in other words, this button here allows me to say you were supposed to talk about ethics because that was the assignment. Actually recapture the assignment right here. Say, here's what you were supposed to do. Here's what you did. So I'm giving that constructive feedback and helping them understand how to do better next time by focusing on the right issue. Now, again, I'm not going to go through all these buttons, but you can see that I have, for the different assignments here, created different buttons for each assignment or for many of the assignments. So with one click, I can put out there a comment that's specific about those particular assignments that I grade many times a year. Now, let's say that same particular assignment has an answer which doesn't really discuss ethics at all. So here you see a button that references that, but it's a very different but still detailed comment back saying, again, the assignment says one paragraph for each one. What you wrote may tie the 6 topics. You did not cover the ethical perspective. Please be sure to read and follow the instructions as they're very specific. So here I'm calling the attention to the assignment. I'm pointing out what was missing. I'm giving some global overall feedback of how to do better in the future. Now, you can easily see from the length of these feedback comments how much time I save or you could save by reusing the comments over and over again. This also helps in the consistency of grading because what you're doing is you're giving the same feedback to every student regardless of whether it's the first student you graded or the last student you graded, whether it's 8 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, or 3 o'clock in the morning. This also increases the integrity because you're able to use the same type of feedback as you teach each course and teach multiple courses, which means that you're grading the same way for APA in multiple courses. Every rendition of the course gets the same feedback, and the tone and content of your feedback can be adjusted. In other words, if you find that your feedback hasn't been working, you can go in and edit the button and adjust your language. Or you may find that you've got a button which isn't exactly perfect, but let's say it's a 5 lines of type and you need to change 1 line, you just save yourself 5 lines of typing. So again, this is not necessarily a university recommendation or endorsement of this particular product, but it certainly is a recommendation from the university to explore ways to save yourself time when you're grading. This is a particular product that I've used now for about 3 years, and I did gain it. Kevin Jones, who works for Indiana Wesleyan, turned me on this program probably about 4 years ago. This is probably 4 years of development for me. Again, he said just something he's used, he found was helpful, and I pass along to everybody I meet. Certainly a way to help you reduce the amount of time, and as we can reduce our time in one area of our online coursework, we can then use that time and invest that time in helping our students in some other area. So again, this is a way to help you become consistent, objective, and maintain integrity, and save yourself a bunch of time. So I would recommend you look at this or a program like it to help you out with your grading.